We are not yet all okay. And I have been asked that many times. We are not okay. And we have a lot of healing to do. And this is how we will know that we are headed down that path of hope. This will be our sign when how we treat one another is a reflection of our hearts.
And that was the Interfaith Prayer Vigil that happened at Washington's National Cathedral ahead of the March for Our Lives, a protest calling for stricter gun control.
That's right, everybody. Today on Faith Nation, we're going to break down the discussion over gun control, especially looking at how the debate is impacting the younger generation in America.
That's right. Amber Strong is in the social seat. And Amber, I know you have a question for all of our viewers out there.
Yeah, that's right. As you know, Faith Nation always wants to connect with you, with all of our viewers. And so make sure that you're connecting with us online and commenting, and we'll be engaging throughout the show. But our question for you is, do you think the gun control protests will lead to significant changes in the gun laws? Comment now, comment below, let us know what you think. And of course, feel free to expand on why you feel the way you do, why or why not. I'll monitor those comments and read them on the air as we go along, Jen and David.
All right. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Amber. Look, hundreds of thousands across the country, as we know, took place in the March for Our Lives this past weekend.
Here
in
Washington, D.C., if I can spit that out.
You can say it.
Students, parents, and other protesters gathered on the National Mall calling for greater gun control. The march was organized in the wake of the Parkland, Florida school shooting that took 17 lives last month. It included survivors of the Parkland shooting, various young speakers, and a star-studded list of musical performers.
Yeah, it was very interesting to have all of that going on. It was really a moment in American history, for sure. You know, high school students obviously were a catalyst in getting the March for Our Lives off the ground, and to see these kids really voice their views publicly and peacefully, which I think was important. Great to see really democracy in action.
Yeah, we decided to head out to the suburbs of D.C. to get a sense of what the talk is in these high school hallways.
Yeah.
And David, as we should point out, one of the students appearing in this next piece is someone you know well.
I do.
Your daughter.
Oh, yeah.
Take a look.
Sometimes, yes, because it's so real that it's happening in schools just like ours. It's such a possibility. I know for me, every time I walk into my school, I'm always aware, like, okay, if someone were to come in here and they were an active shooter, how would I get out, and where would I go, and what would I do?
On any given day, I mean, I wouldn't say I think about it too much, but I don't think any student at any school where there's been a school shooting has ever gone to school thinking that there was going to be one. And there really is no reason it couldn't happen at any given time at any given school. So it definitely is like a reality we're all living with.
I think like what Alina said, that like you plan out when you go to school, like what classrooms and how you would get out of an active shooting drill, and like that fear is inside of you at all times when you're at school.
I don't feel very fearful because I always see the security guards and all the adults in the building, and I trust that they can keep us safe.
I'm personally not very scared because, well, I always think negatively, and if you think that way, there's something that can go wrong in any situation. So it could really happen wherever, whenever. It doesn't really matter where you are. You just have to not give in to fear.
The topic really never goes away. It's always something that's going to be in the back of your mind.
Yeah, it's definitely something we talk about, especially in terms of like people's opinions on gun control. And like, do you think that gun control could have prevented this kind of shooting? Or even something as basic as like, how do you think you would have reacted if this had happened to you? But it definitely is something we talk about because it is such a pressing issue.
I think as soon as one happens, then it's like spread along like kids, because we have the power of social media nowadays. So we see as soon as it happens, we see when it does happen, and that becomes a big topic with everyone in every class. So it's always talked about as soon as it happens and disappears slowly within the weeks.
I think it does really spread like wildfire, starting from social media, then people are just telling everyone in class, and it passes on from class to class, and everyone soon knows about it and talks about it.
I say for like a week or two, it's like wildfire, just spreading, everyone's talking about it, but slowly kind of dies out as time goes on, because it kind of just runs out of fuel.
I mean, I would definitely like to see some more realistic drills in the schools of what we would do in case of a shooter, but I personally don't believe that until that comprehensive gun reform is passed and gun control, I don't think that anything that the school system can do can make us that much safer, because the reality is that they can put in all the security measures they want, but if people who shouldn't have guns are still having access to guns, I don't think that much of a difference is going to be made.
Definitely more drills and more strict drills, in the sense that if a student decides to talk during a drill, they should be reprimanded for interfering with either the lockdown drill or the shelter-in-place drill.
Definitely, I agree with more drills, like more lockdown and whatnot, and but like armed and trained guards, not just like people there, like they're armed with something other than just fists.
I didn't do the school walkout, but I just went to March for Our Lives with my family, and that was definitely one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had. I mean, it was just so incredible to see not only the amazing speakers, from Parkland and all that, who were just incredible, but also to see how many people were giving up their Saturday to rally behind a cause they're so passionate about, and that really gave me a lot of hope and made me feel a lot better for our future.
I'm planning on doing the April 20th one, and I didn't get to go to March for Our Life, but I did watch it on TV.
I did not participate in the walkout, but I applaud those who did and who believe in the cause.
I didn't participate in the walkout or the March for Our Lives because I believe that we're not addressing the right problem with the walkout type of thing. Like, the problem isn't necessarily total gun control, like take away all the guns type of thing. I believe that the problem is more like a mental health issue, like a problem with bullying, where people don't really stand up for each other or defend each other when it comes down to it. Like, there are just people out there who have just depression and issues like that people aren't really helping to address.
Yeah, so I would say that generally I do feel safe in my school, but at the same time, I don't think it's realistic to think that until there are certain systems put in place with gun control, not necessarily taking guns away from people, but controlling who has access and what kind of arms, I don't think that we're going to be able to have true safety, not only in our schools, but throughout the rest of the country.
It's nice to see those kids really speaking out and engaged in the issue. One of them, of course, my daughter, as you know, Alina. And, look, this is the topic not just in the high school hallways, but at home, with parents and their kids and really kind of talking through this. And I can tell you, generationally, it's different. These kids it's nice for them that they're thinking for themselves, but what's also really neat is that they are understanding that there can be some compromise here without selling out the Second Amendment. And these kids are actually a lot more smarter than, let's be honest, than a parent might have thought exactly. They're really thinking through the issues. So that's exciting to see just in and of itself.
Well, speaking of the Second Amendment, did you see this? A former Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, he wants to repeal the Second Amendment. Did you see that? The president, he was even tweeting about it this morning. This is President Trump. This is what he tweeted. The Second Amendment will never be repealed, all caps. As much as Democrats would like to see this happen, and despite the words yesterday of former Supreme Court Justice Stevens, no way, we need more Republicans in 2018 and must always hold the Supreme Court. I think Republicans, they see this former Supreme Court Justice doing this and they say, hey, keep it coming.
Yeah, right.
This just makes the Democrats look so far left.
Yeah, they don't need to do that.
And really out of touch. And I think so many Democrats in the middle and who aren't that far left would say, we need the Second Amendment. I think most Americans would agree.
I would totally agree with that. Ask Joe Manchin and some of those moderate Democrats.
Yeah. Amber, I know you've got your pulse on this as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's going to be interesting to see come midterms what happens with a lot of those moderate Democrats, as you just mentioned, if they're going to use this gun control as a platform, because let's face it, we're hearing it, and now they're kind of in a pinch, which way do we go on this? So it'll be interesting to watch. You guys have a lot to say and a lot of comments coming in.
Really?
Oh yeah. And actually a wide spectrum here. So this one right here is from Bernadette, who says, guns are not the problem, sin is the problem. Owen, who says, our rights come from God, not the government. The Second Amendment secures our God-given rights. This one from Andrea, who says, if you lose the Second Amendment, you lose the rest. But on the other side, Batista says, something has to be done. control is needed. And Cynthia, who says, the least of these shall prevail, stand with our children. So definitely varied comments. Keep them coming. We'll keep reading them. And obviously you guys are discussing among yourselves. So I'm just facilitating and watching. So yeah, a lot going on there.
Yeah, of course, the other side to that, to the gun control side, is the NRA viewpoint.
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
For sure. And look, Jenna and Amber, I got to say that the NRA has really got to figure this thing out. They cannot go from talking points from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, from the pre-Columbine. I mean, let's update the talking points here and figure out what we're going to do. I say we're going to do as a country, as a nation, you know, as concerned citizens and parents. Look, at some point it just becomes too much, and I think the Parkland kids not only were articulate and they got on social media and did all of that, but it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, Columbine, Sandy Hook, all horrible, but sometimes it just gets to a point, and the NRA's got to figure out at this point what in the world they're going to do. I understand that they don't want the Second Amendment to go away, and as Donald Trump said today, all caps not going away. But they've got to figure out how to come to the middle a little bit. And I think school safety could be a piece of that, but mental health for sure is going to have to be a piece of this as well.
Yeah. Well, the March for Our Lives and the renewed call for gun control came in the wake of the Parkland, Florida school shooting.
Right. And now the father of one of the Parkland victims is speaking out, calling on more people to focus on the importance of school safety.
CBN News' Charlene Aaron brings us this story.
Andrew Pollock is on a mission to keep students in America's schools safe, something he wasn't able to do for his own daughter. 18-year-old Meadow Pollock was one of 17 people killed when a gunman opened fire at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. After being shot 4 times, Meadow still tried to protect another student.
She covered the freshman, and this animal went down the hallway and shot my daughter another 5 times at point blank, and it went through her and killed the girl underneath her.
During a televised listening session at the White House days after the shooting, Pollock spoke passionately about the need to protect schools.
Should have been one school shooting, and we should have fixed it. And I'm pissed, because my daughter I'm not going to see again.
Pollock says he believes school security is more attainable at the moment.
It's not a waste of time because they're kids, they're making noise, they're bringing awareness to schools. So I applaud them for that. But I think if they focused on school safety first and then got all the schools safe in the country and then focused on gun control, that would be something that's achievable right now.
Pollock also told me his son was not allowed to speak during the March for Our Lives rally because his speech didn't focus on gun control.
They denied him to speak with a couple of other boys, too, that had different agendas. They wanted to talk mostly about school safety.
Pollock also pushed for newly passed gun laws in Florida, which include raising the age to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21, a ban on the sale or possession of bump stocks, and funding for armed school resource officers. Meanwhile, Pollock plans to build a playground honoring Meadow and the 16 others who lost their lives in the tragic school shooting. This weekend, he's holding an event called Ride for Meadow. Motorcycle enthusiasts are encouraged to sign up to help raise money for the project.
I had this idea to build this playground in the community in Coral Springs. It's going to be built, and everyone in the community is going to be able to enjoy it. And I'm going to build a memorial there for the other 16 victims. The playground, it can't be just a regular playground because it's for my daughter, so it has to be spectacular. I wouldn't settle for anything less, and that's the way she's been her whole life. She was never average. My kid was never average.
Yeah, and your heart just goes out to all of these parents and all of these people who have been affected by these horrific school shootings. I will say, so we see these marches happening all over the country, really all over the world, and the thing is what's going to happen in November? If these students, if they don't register to vote, if they don't vote, then really all of this is in vain.
Right, and I will just, to add on to that real quick, I would say that this is where some of those, let's just say it, those liberal Democrat groups that were at the March for Our Lives rally come in, because they're going to be working with some of these students to do a get out the vote operation. And so that's well, I shouldn't say the danger. It's great if the students go and exercise their right to vote. The danger is that if the liberal left groups co-opt the students' voice and message, and then at that point, I think it becomes way more political, and that's a problem for them. And it shouldn't. And I would hate to see that happen.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I think if it's a problem, it's going to be for Republicans.
Yeah.
And we saw that at the march. I was there. I covered it, and scattered throughout the crowd were people registering these kids to vote.
Interesting.
And it was passionate, and every time someone would register, they would all cheer and scream. And we obviously want people to register to vote, but I think any good Republican would be paying attention right now.
Yeah.
We got a lot of good comments coming in. This one from Yolanda, which I just thought we had to read. She just said to the father in the last package, "God bless you." So I wanted to pass that one along.
Nice.
This one right here from Anthony, which goes along to the comment I read earlier about standing with our children. Anthony responded, "Stand with the children, but don't let the children decide what's best." So definitely a lot of comments going. Keep them coming in. We'll keep reading them.
All right, well, young people are stepping up to take a stand about gun control in America. When we come back, we'll talk with a youth pastor about the climate students across the country face today. Stay with us.
In uncertain times, nothing matters like the truth. That's the strength of CBN News. We pursue stories that make a difference.
Political situation in this country has been tumultuous.
From the world's most powerful city.
The White House asked for emergency Zika funding.
To its biblical center.
2 mortars just hit. One was about 300 yards away.
No other Christian organization puts the resources and experience into covering the news you care about.
That's the power of CBN News.
Well, as the country debates gun control, many pastors are working to figure out the best way to minister in these divisive times.
That's right, Jenna. And with school shootings in the news, youth pastors face an especially tough task.
They do. For more on that, we are joined now by Pastor Jerry Varner. He's a youth pastor at Southside Church in Chesterfield, Virginia. Pastor Varner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, David and Jenna. It's awesome to be here.
Pastor Varner, in terms of gun violence, if you listen to what a lot of these students are saying, many of them are scared. How, as a youth pastor, do you come alongside these teens when they're feeling this way?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to understand something about fear. I understand that fear is a really real thing in the minds of so many students today. But what I want to continually remind students is that it's always a secondary emotion. It never stands alone. It's always attached to something. And in this instance, as we're talking about gun violence and safety in school and all those things. So what I want to do as I talk about fear is you have to address the thing that it's attached to. And so in this, we want to help students grab hold of the power that they have to affect change. And in doing that, they will address the fear. In Psalm 23, David, young shepherd boy, said, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." David didn't say, "Though I sit." He didn't even say, "Though I stand." So there is this forward motion that's important as we address fear. So the greatest help that we can be to students who are experiencing fear is to remind them and show them that the fear that they're facing doesn't deserve the power that we often give it.
You know, Pastor, you mentioned forward motion. We've seen a lot of that recently, obviously, the wake of the Parkland shootings, people all across the country marching on Washington and all over the country. You work with teens, obviously, every day. Can you tell us a little bit about the power that these students really do have to bring about change?
Sure. In fact, I was talking to one of our students yesterday, a teenage girl who actually attended the March for Our Lives a couple of days ago. And as we talked, we discovered a lot of things that we agreed on and a couple of what I would consider minor things that we don't really see eye to eye on. But what I was careful to do in my interaction with her was to stoke the flame of passion that she has, to be the influence and make the impact that God has designed her and this young generation to make. I'm 44 years old. I'm not afraid to tell you that. And as a 44-year-old adult, I have to constantly be on guard against what I call the "you punk kids get off my lawn" syndrome. As adults, we can inadvertently squelch or even kind of snuff out the passion that students have to shape the world around them. And the amazing climate that we have today is one of hyper-informed, hyper-connected, hyper-activated students. Never before in history has this been the case. So it's critical that we provide guardrails instead of roadblocks. We want to leverage the power and the passion for change that they have with some of the wisdom from life experiences that we have. And personally, I think that any other response is dismissive and wasteful.
And Pastor Varner, how can the church remain united when it comes to such a divisive issue like gun control?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I've told students countless times that we all get 1,444 minutes a day, and consider that to be 1,444 bricks, right? So what are you going to do with those bricks? Are you going to build a wall or are you going to build a bridge? And at the end of the day, those are really the only two options. So much time seems to be spent in fortifying walls. And I wish that I could say that the church at large isn't involved in that, but we are. I think if we're going to be the answer to Jesus' prayer for our unity, remember he said, God the Son said to God the Father, may they be one, speaking of us, may they be one as you and I are one. Now that's tight, right? That is unified. And if we're going to be the answer to Jesus' prayer, then we have to employ some Christ-centered, some Spirit-enabled characteristics. We have to become far better listeners. I'm convinced of that. I don't see any other path to gaining the right to be heard than to first listen well. So the gun control issue has quickly become a place where we're actively building walls instead of bridges.
Pastor Jerry Varner, great insight. Sir, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it here.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
You know, it's nice to have folks like Pastor Varner there for such a time as this, because, I mean, he has some great insights, and this is what the kids need to hear in the churches today.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, Amber, what are people saying?
This one right here is from Christy. She says, we as parents need to get back to the basics, teach our children how to love one another and how to be kind to each other, which is some of the things that we've heard repeated over and over about how we treat each other in these situations. Mm-hmm. This one from Dan, who says guns are not the problem. Bullying causes school shootings. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe with school shootings, but then there's a larger issue because you have like Dylan Roof in Charleston, and you have Sandy Hook in Aurora, Colorado with the movie theater. So mass shootings is a whole separate thing from bullying, and it goes back to what you said about mental health as well. There are a lot of little nuggets that go into what is happening. For sure.
I think underneath all of this is the culture. You know, it's just become such a, I mean, this, I mean,
it's angry. It's so
that's what
angry.
it is. I couldn't put my finger on it. That's exactly what it is. It's just felt just negative and, like you said, angry and just, I don't know. And I feel like, you know, kids, I wish there were more hope today. I know we were back in, I remember back in, you know, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, there's a lot more hope in, you know, in America and patriotism in the country, and it just feels like we're so divisive today.
Yeah, the
and divisive.
The need for faith is so, it's just, there's such a huge need for faith, and you think about it, people who don't have a faith, well, all of their eggs are kind of in one basket, and their hope is in this world. And when you don't have that hope in something greater, then things, they drive you crazy.
That's
they
right.
do. This world will drive you crazy.
That's right.
I think the pastor hit on it when he talked about fear, and David knew his purpose and he knew where he was going, and our home is eternal. And I think when you're able to focus on that eternal destination, whether you're on the left and you've put all your eggs in the basket of gun control, or you're on the right and you're putting your eggs in the basket of guns, really your eggs should be in God's hands. That's where you need to be focused.
There was a great point. There was a song I was listening to this morning, a worship song, you know, obviously the Gaithers, right? Because he lives, we can face tomorrow. And just this idea that, you know, if you have faith and confidence in a Savior that's real and is not going anywhere, there's confidence in that.
Amen. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
I was on the path of destruction. Jail, prison, hustling, living by the gun. I felt something on me so strong that I just had to break down. I told God why I felt like I had to hustle. But then in the end, I just said, you know, Jesus, just save me, man. Can't do this, man. I could feel it when I was done. So much weight was taken off of me. Jesus took a wretched man like me, cleaned me up.
It's a question many people have been wrestling with. How should Christians respond to the gun control debate? Well, earlier today, I got to speak with Dan Andros of faithwire.com about how prominent pastors have come out for and against guns. Take a look. Dan, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So how have different pastors used the Bible to justify the varying opinions on guns?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting debate because, first of all, you don't see a lot of pastors actually readily willing to weigh in on this debate because it's so divisive. I mean, just this weekend at the March for Our Lives rally, you had people like Senator Marco Rubio being called a child killer and being mocked for his faith. So it's not exactly easy territory to get into because you instantly get pitted as one side of the political aisle or the other. But and then another interesting fact for pastors, though, is that white evangelicals are actually more likely to own a gun, 41% versus 30% in the nation. So they do have an audience actually that is, kind of leaning, more to one side. And but you have people like Robert Jeffress, Pastor Jeffress, who says that many of his church members are armed, and they go there armed, and that being pro-life is being pro-gun, and that's sort of the pro and against argument. Actually, that same one, being pro-life is being pro-gun, whereas actually some people say you can't be pro-life and also pro-gun. And the defense would go something like this in most cases for people like Jeffress and others, is that you are valuing the sanctity of human life by protecting it. You look at people like Stephen Williford in the Texas church massacre. He came out there and he had an AR-15 and he stopped that shooter. Did he have murder in his heart, or was he actually trying to protect human life? You have the Maryland hero, Blaine Gaskill, the security guard, did the same thing, trying to protect lives, and he ultimately did save more lives. And then, interestingly, when you look at the Parkland shooting and the officer who did not go in, the public reaction from Christians and everyone else alike was one of being appalled. People were appalled that he didn't go in and actually do something to save life. So that would be sort of the biblical defense, that you are protecting the sanctity of human life by using force in those instances. But some people on the other side, like evangelical minister Rob Shank, who's been he was featured in Time, his quotes this week, and that's kind of been making the rounds on the internet. And he's been saying for some time now, and he's pretty conservative on most issues, but he's been saying that he can't be pro-life and pro-gun, and he cites Matthew 5 in his defense, and that's when Jesus is talking about, that we shouldn't murder, but also if you have anger in your heart towards another brother, that you've committed murder. So he's going down that road. But again, the critics to that argument would point back and say that you have to break out the difference between murder and killing. And if we have murder in our hearts, that's quite different than using force and having to kill somebody, as we just mentioned, as all those heroes did.
You were speaking on some of the pushback, and one of the pushback that I've heard several times is that we as Christians are called to follow Jesus Christ. So how does his life and his lifestyle factor into the debate on guns?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing here is, we can debate about the legislative stuff all we want, but at the end of the day, what we have is we don't have a gun problem. And that's not like a big pro 2A thing. Don't make that a political statement. We really don't have a gun problem. We've got a heart problem. We've got a sin problem. And that is truth, no matter how you slice it, any way, shape, or form. And you cannot solve a spiritual issue by legislating it. You just can't do it. And we're in a unique position as the church, as Christians, as believers, where we do have the solution. We have the gospel. The gospel is the solution to this. When you look at all of these shootings, when you look at the mass shootings at schools, what is the common denominator in all of it? And it's that these people were outcasts. They were bullied. they were marginalized. And so what are we to do as Christians? Did Jesus hang out with the popular? No, he hung out with the marginalized, the sinners, the beggars, the lepers. That's what he did, and that's what we should do too. And when we bring people the gospel, that ultimately can bring healing, any way more, than any legislative accomplishment could possibly ever dream of doing.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for talking to us. You guys have a lot of content about this whole debate from a spiritual aspect and just overall on faithwire.com, and I suggest that you guys go check it out. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Dan Andros with the insight. Yeah, he covered a lot of the sides of this. I think, especially the one I keep hearing is the pro-life. What does it mean to be pro-life, and how both sides are using this word?
Yeah.
You're not really pro-life if you don't protect the lives of others, and you're not really pro-life if you are in favor of guns. So I think Dan did a good job of trying to explain kind of where this divide is in the church. We're not talking about this divide on different sides. So
For sure.
Good job, Dan.
You know, there is a divide about what gun control should look like, and the Democrats, one Democratic lawmaker has an idea.
Don't make me laugh. You've heard of gun control. How about bullet control? This is the new bill. Literally, we're not making this up, folks. This is a bill by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You've probably heard about her.
Former head of the DNC.
She's on the far left, that's right. It's called the Ammunition Background Check Act, introduced by Wasserman Schultz and a few other folks as well. It would require background checks for, wait for it, purchasing bullets. I'm not even looking, I'm not making eye contact with you right now, but yes, that's, this is the day.
This on the heels of former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens. The Republicans are just saying, keep it coming. This is great. This is great for their purpose.
Yeah.
I think even some of the Parkland students came out after John Paul Stevens and said, thank you, but no thank you. This is not what we're saying.
Right.
And what you're saying is too far. We're asking for common sense gun control. We're not asking for completely repealing the Second Amendment.
Right.
So please stop.
Something in the middle, yeah.
Politicians, please get out of the way. Let the students.
Speaking of, I got a great comment here from Joan. Thank you for the segue.
Oh, good, okay.
Joan says the church is supposed to represent the people. We are who are followers of God, and the leaders of the church should be spreading the teachings of Jesus Christ when he was on earth and not spreading politicians' propagandas and agendas. So that's Joan's take on everything there. And then just a lot of love from the youth pastor, a great conversation for the youth pastor, great insight from the youth pastor, and we talked about just him punching on that thing of fear is so important for sharing with our kids. I remember living through Columbine, and that I'm all the way in Indiana, that's all the way in Colorado, and it was still so real. So just touching on the fear and making sure the kids understand where their hope is.
Amen and amen.
Amen. All right, well, that is going to do it for Faith Nation today, but go ahead and continue to engage with us right here.
That's right. Jana, Amber, and I will stick around for a bit, continue to talk with all of you right here on Facebook. Make sure you're commenting. Important.
And make sure that you join us right back here next Wednesday for another Faith Nation. We'll see you then.